this is time for free your mind and your soul. Yo, half the story has never been told. Ladies, you got to demand what you want, and what we want is respect, right? Yo, just sit up on the track, I know so you have to feel that it right. Freedom every time for the sisters. Check this. Watch this.
Here we go now. Listen, if I'm boom boom rule, I be the ruler like Slick Rick. Hit with this quick witted Adidas wearing chick. Papa got a brand new bag. Mama got a brand new Jag. Or go tag. I ain't no old hag. I represent not only in the kitchen, in the bedroom, but also in the boardroom. So give me more room. Deny my opportunity. You in jeopardy. Yo, set me free. Don't hinder me. Let me be.
I'm fighting for freedom. I got the heat in case you need them. Straight soldier. Ain't nobody told ya. Hold up on them lies. I know your games and your plans.
Sorry, no one can hear me. I'm really sorry. Hello, welcome to the Book Slam Extra. I'm your host, Jules. I hope you all had a really good week. I'm sorry I couldn't be here last week. I wasn't very well. But I feel a lot better now. So thank you very much for asking. How are you? I hope you have had a good week as well. Now, I am an author I've written 4 books. I've got 3 more on the way. And my genre is mainly in science fiction and fantasy. I'm quite lucky. I've won some awards as well that fit those categories too in those genres. I have decided to dip my toe into something a little bit more risque, shall we say, to do with the genre that I normally write in. But I thought it'd be quite nice today to talk about how does genre get chosen by the author or the writer? Even is genre important anymore? Are there genres anymore? And what if you don't want to write in that genre anymore because you want to actually test and make yourself better at writing? Well, we're going to have a little bit of a deep dive today with my lovely co-host, which I'll invite on in just a second. And we've got 2 lovely guest authors as well visiting us. Just to very briefly introduce myself to you, apart from being an author, I also do book publishing as well. I've got some very exciting bits in the works there. Looking forward to 2024 when they're going to come out. Watch this space. I've also set up a Discord. It's still in its infancy stage, but I'm hoping to grow it. Basically, it's set up specifically for authors and only authors and writers and poets and people who want to be beta readers. And people who want to get really involved with the writing community and to provide support and, just be there for people. I also do this. We do this every Thursday at the same time. You can catch it live on YouTube, or you can actually catch it live on LinkedIn, or you can also watch it as a rerun. That's my dog, by the way, opening the door. I don't have ghosts here. You can catch this on a rerun. So if you do like this, like and subscribe. It'd be really helpful to help the channel grow and to get the message out there to other authors. We also love to have interactions with our audience as well. So if you do want to get involved with the show, perhaps you have a question for one of the authors. Perhaps you wanted to know something very important about what we were talking about. Perhaps you wanted to just get involved and have a nice comment shown on screen. Well, you can do that. Join us over on YouTube. You can join us there on the live chat, and great messages will be shown on screen. And without further ado, I'm going to invite my wonderful co-host to the stream. Oh, welcome, Adam. How are you doing?
Great. Before we get too in-depth, you've got a little buzz coming from your microphone. Just make sure it's plugged in all the way or something. You sound clear, but there's another noise coming from it. Oh, it sounds like it's gone. I think it's gone. I think we're good. I don't know what you did, but
I'm a technology wizard, Adam. That's what I do. I press buttons and it works.
So hi everyone, I'm Adam. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to be here. We missed you last week.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you as well. I just was not capable of even speaking. So
makes sense.
I would have looked a bit of a mess.
You're the heart and soul of the show, so we can't do it without you.
Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you. Well, I did miss everyone. And I know that we didn't get a chance to do our After Dark, did we? So we are going to do that in the next week or two. So watch this space for the After Dark. We haven't forgotten about that. And Adam, would you like to introduce a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Adam Andrews Johnson. I also write fantasy, dark and light. I've got a new book out, the Mantis variant, which is very dark fantasy. It's horror on the edge of horror, dystopian primarily. It takes place in a crazy future. But I've also written a massive queer norm erotica fantasy novel that Jules is putting out with her publishing company come 2024. We're excited about that. We're just in the works of that, so that's exciting. And that book has a lot of erotica and heavy topics, specifically with human sexuality, celebrating queer people. And the other book is just crazy nightmares scenario. So yeah. And I've written a sequel to this, which I'm in the process of editing. So I'm excited to have that at some point as well. So it's on eBay or ebook. It's on ebook. Sorry, I misspoke there. It's on ebook. Cheap on Kindle. It's $3 or $4 or something like that. And then you can also get it in paperback. But so that's us. I'm Adam. That's Jules, and we're happy to see you all today. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely, yeah. We absolutely, yeah. Oh, I feel bad now because I haven't shown my books.
Do it. Yeah. Bring up your award-winning books, as you said. Say the names of them.
Thank you. So, like I said, I write in fantasy and I'm pressing buttons that I didn't know I had.
What? Everything seems fine. Everything seems fine here. I don't see anything.
My screen's gone massive, but it's fine. It still works. It's fine. So as I said before, I write in science fiction and fantasy. So I actually this is book 1 of my series. This is kind of blended genre. So this is kind of blend between science, fantasy, dystopian, sword and sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons.
Awesome.
So if you like monsters, if you like lots of deaths and battles and sword fighting and various other bits and pieces that kind of go along with that, it's a pretty good book to get. And then this is book 2 of the same series, following the same person, the same lead character. And what I've tried to do is actually create more of a stream of consciousness for the character as she goes through trauma and she has to recover from all the shit that she has to go through. So there's those 2. And I've also done children's ones as well, which are also in the fantasy genre too. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I see what I've done. I've enlarged the screen. It's interesting how we've both chosen a genre that fits us, and I'm really interested to find out what made you choose that particular genre and why. And I'm also really interested in talking to both Morgan and Dylan, who are going to be brought on in just a moment.
Two brand new guests who've never been on the show before today. This is pretty exciting. And we have 2 brand new guests from last week who we have rescheduled, but it will be a couple weeks out in the future. We'll have them back on at some point. So it's all good.
That's so wonderful to hear, and I'm really grateful to them for being so kind at
very flexible. Very flexible. Yep, it's all good.
Well, should we invite our lovely guests on and you can introduce them both?
Why don't we bring them on?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's Morgan, I'm going to press your button first. And Dylan.
And there we are. Yay!
Hi,
welcome.
Dylan. Wonderful. Welcome. How lovely of you to come here. I'm so happy that you managed to join us.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. And Morgan, I like that you have arranged your hoodie to imitate my hair.
That's the secret. I don't have hair, so I have to imitate it.
Ah, nicely done, sir. I was fooled.
Thanks.
I also believed that you have a beard.
I do.
Totally fooled on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Dylan, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your process of writing, what you write.
I'm sorry, was that to me or to Morgan? I was.
Dylan, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm a humorist and a storyteller professionally, as well as a writer. I write every day. My current book that I thought we were talking about today is Relatively Painless, right there, available at Amazon, and of course at dylanbrody.com. My previous book, Laughs Last, right there behind me. I have written in the adventure fantasy genre. My first published novel was A Tale of a Hero and the Song of Her Sword, adventure fantasy for teens, a feminist anthem for gifted kids. I did not know that it was a young adult novel or that it was for kids. I thought it was a grown-up novel, but I am a simpleton. I perform. I perform regularly. I write constantly. And my next project, I really look forward to discussing genre work with you guys, because my next project is a return to genre. I have a new novel that I've just finished a rewrite on called Merlin's Mistake, in which in COVID era New York, the great wizard Merlin has figured out that all of the world's problems were created when he put all of the magic and symbolism into a weapon. So he puts together a team to find Excalibur and destroy it.
It's his fault.
And over the course of the piece, he figures out that he's done a lot more damage than that, because there's misogyny built into it, and there's all this sort of male dominance and stuff that's built into the legend, and he has to slowly unwrap all this storytelling power that got embedded in the human zeitgeist. It's a really cool piece, and I've developed it as a 10-episode limited series as well, and I'm trying to take that out. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk genre with you guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thanks, Dylan.
You're so very welcome.
Yeah, totally excited.
I'm getting a terrible buzz. Is that just me, or is it?
Oh, I thought we figured it out. I don't hear it anymore. Oh no, I do hear it again. I do hear it again. Jules, I think it's
is it mine?
I think it's your microphone.
Let's see if I can figure it out. Hang on a second.
Well, mute yourself for just a second. Let's see if it goes away.
Sorry, I can't figure it out. I'm really sorry.
What if you unplug your microphone and plug it back in?
It's a good idea.
That's what it sounds
I'll
like.
mute myself in the process so you don't get any massive feedback sounds.
Bad connection. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Ooh, sorry, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. We're getting there.
It's quite all right. We all live in a modern age where none of us knows how any of it works.
Exactly. We're just grateful when it does.
That's so true. How's that? Is that better?
So much better.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I hear nothing. Okay.
It's like you cured a headache.
That's what we've been working on.
Nicely done.
All right, Morgan, why don't you take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about you and the work that you've written and stuff?
Yeah, so I primarily focus in science fiction currently. So I wrote a book called Carlisle Station, also a self-published author. Heavily influenced by horror. I lean a lot into the darker aspects of horror. As far as my writing schedule goes, it's kind of as I can get it. And recently I've forced myself into a morning routine. So I get up at 4 and write for a couple hours before I go to work.
Nice.
That's dedicated.
It makes progress. It's not fun, but it does make progress happen. Yeah. So as far as Carlisle Station goes, I'm turning it into a series. It's science fiction horror where it's developed into a completely different galaxy. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your thing kicked back on again. It's making noise again.
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
I'll turn off one thing and I'll see if I work. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Morgan.
Oh, you're okay.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But it's in the Triangulum Galaxy instead of the Milky Way. And there's a large mysticism behind how humanity even got there, because by the time they got there, they had forgotten how. So with that, there's kind of a digression in technology. It's still super progressive as far as technology goes, but from where they were, they took, 4 steps forward, 5 steps back. So there's a lot of theory of the unknown going on with the horror aspects involved.
I love that concept. I love both the concepts with Merlin. What's really interesting is obviously King Arthur is a tale from England that seems to have seeped across the globe and become so many different things. Like Transformers had a whole thing about Merlin as well, which is pretty cool. I love it. It's a really interesting tale, and I really love the idea of, perhaps humans came to this galaxy, but we've forgotten how we got here. So I love that. It's such an interesting concept. Have I stopped buzzing?
Well, right now you're doing just fine. Thank you, Jules.
Sounds okay again.
And for the record, I stopped buzzing about 3 weeks ago, and I'm a little bit nudgedica over it. On the Merlin thing, my mom was an Arthurian Legends PhD candidate. She went for a PhD in Arthurian Legends, although her dissertation was ultimately rejected because it was dumb. But so I was sort of surrounded by Arthurian legend when I was a kid. And I grew up reading fantasy. I grew up with the Chronicles of Narnia and the Chronicles of Prydain and all of that stuff. Oz, even before those to some degree, I think. So by the time I was an adult and was starting to write, it seemed perfectly natural. It seemed to me that what writers do is start with fantasy. And it wasn't until way later that I started exploring more I don't mean more contemporary, what are considered more literary forms, the anthology, the novel that is not adventure fantasy, and so on. And every time I get back to it, I realize how much of our cultural underpinnings are now in this generation born of adventure fantasy thinking. I mean, everybody now, it's a younger generation than I who grew up reading Harry Potter. But everybody feels at some level that there was magic promised that's been denied us. And we're all exploring the ways in which that can manifest in the world that we inhabit.
If we look at these, I mean, I'm not an expert on history, but I do know a little bit about the history of Britain. And
embrace your inner Kunk. Embrace your inner Philomena.
Absolutely, she's so funny. I don't know how the historians and the experts that she talks to keep a straight face. Oh my God, she's hilarious. Yeah, absolutely. Well, when the Romans came over here, they obviously they were met with force by the Britons who inhabited here, and obviously it was Celtic and it was paganism as their, I suppose, religion. Although it's not. I don't know if it really counts as a religion because it's less of a belief of loads of gods or God. It's more embracing nature and embracing like well-being within nature and things like that. But because it was Christianity that came and had very different views on it, but they also had like the god of war and the god of love, and like Mars and Venus, for example, and other goddesses and gods like that. So the paganistic rituals seemed like magic to them. And then you had the Druids as well, who were very mysterious. And when the Celtics went to war, they painted themselves in blue paint. Now, obviously, it wasn't like paint that we have nowadays, but it was like a chalk-based dyed paint. They would like smear all over
to it.
Pardon?
The woad.
The Picts used to add hallucinogens to their blue paint that they would put on.
Yeah, and they would also have rituals to do with coming of age that were different to the rituals that came with the Romans. And so mysticism was seen as a thing that happened. So magic has been, I suppose, embedded as part of our culture for a long, long time, just in various forms.
I'm studying, I am a practicing druid and a studying bard. Present.
Wow.
And there's this idea that I've been exploring in the writers' workshops that I run, because it keeps coming up over and over again. As a comic, I believe that joke is inherently magical. That if I say the right words in the right order with the right inflection and the right pacing, I can cause an entire room full of people to have the same thought at the same time.
Yes.
Now, the Druids had something called a satire that I believe to be the origin of the modern limerick, whereby they could speak a few magical lines, generally rhyming, which once spoken made it impossible for the public, for the tribe, for the group, to show the same respect and to give the same authority to whatever figure this spell was cast upon.
Wow.
It's a good joke. It's an insult. It's a limerick. It's there once was a man from Nantucket, and now that we know Trump shits his diapers while in interviews, we can't quite think of him as being that important and powerful anymore, right? The writing itself, the idea that we could put words on a page and distribute them and have other people hear our voices when we're not there, is inherently magical. And I think much of the difficulty we have as a society, as a civilization, is that as we have developed what we call technology, we have failed to obey the rules of magic that were embedded in our legend. You don't use it for personal gain. You use it for the good of the whole. Once you start using it for personal gain, it darkens and becomes damaging. And, we invented the magic mirror with the television and then spent the next 40 years staring at narcissistic, beautiful images of ourselves and pretending that, that everything was good. It's, I think magic is real. Go ahead.
No. That's amazing. I mean, I'm now thinking, oh God, did I say anything wrong? You obviously know a lot more than I do. Nothing. So I was okay with what I said. My understanding of our history is okay.
Well, if we're going to talk about history, then I guess we should follow up with sort of the American history, because I think that what Dylan said is exactly what American history was. America was set up by a bunch of rich white men who wanted to keep the population stupid. They really wanted us to be as stupid as possible. They wanted us to have all the beer we could possibly imagine. They wanted to keep the coffee for themselves. They didn't want us to drink tea. They wanted us to be stupid. And they've wanted us to be stupid for every single day since the founding of this country.
Well,
when TV came along, it was just another way to keep us stupid.
I think "they" is a little bit vague. I think there are gradations of who wants what and what is conscious conspiracy and what is just convenient conspiracy. But I think it's all just terrible. I'm bothered that Morgan isn't speaking enough. I'm tired of him.
We're going to bring Morgan in next. I want to know what got everybody into genre. So that's we're going to go to Morgan now and tell us, how did you get into your not only the fandom of horror but also writing in the futuristic science fiction sort of way? What got you into that?
Yeah, so it's not as exciting as most people probably come to when they pick out a genre. I actually started off just like Dylan said, in fantasy. I grew up on fantasy. It's what I read as a kid. It's what I wanted to start writing. But it came down to when I started writing, actually taking it seriously. I wanted to really dive into something I hadn't experienced before, to give myself a challenge and force myself to learn a lot more than just the writing aspect of it.
Yep.
So I picked the closest thing to fantasy, but still challenging enough, which was science fiction for me. As far as horror goes, that's just the genre I've always been appealed to. Probably exposed to horror films too early in childhood, so just enjoy them a lot more than I probably should. But
it's awesome.
I like darker aspects of things.
Tell us a little bit about the story itself. What happens in your story?
Yeah, so it's a shorter story in a larger picture. It revolves around a character named Sarah Vermillion, and she gets indoctrinated into a corporate prison system very early on in her life. And the way this corporation functions is they pick people out of their prison systems and they just push them into corporatized colonization. And so they're sole employees that work on research bases that usually orbit potentially colonizable planets. And there's an AI on board each of these systems that the prisoners have to maintain and do maintenance for. So during this study, she's essentially doing maintenance on this station, and she's on the last leg of her prison sentence when she gets hailed by a ship requesting help. And on this ship is potential danger, but she does potentially get involved with it.
It's got very almost aliens kind of vibe
yeah,
going on there.
So there's another aspect to it. There is a kind of an evolved form of human life that's able to manipulate things with their minds. And so when these two things kind of cross, the best way I can describe it to people is Event Horizon meets Alien is
nice.
kind of the way I describe it to people.
That's amazing.
Thank you. There's a lot of psychedelic horror in it.
Awesome.
I don't think horror is. I know people tend to balk at horror a little bit because if you're writing really dark stuff, some people are a bit like, oh, you must have a really dark mind, and you know, your mind must be forever engaged in all these dark thoughts. And actually, it's not. It's an expression of, you know, ideas and concepts that, you know, happen to mesh together really well. And it's almost an exploration of the human form, isn't it? At the way that we think and how we react to things. And
very much so.
What would you do?
Yeah. I also think horror in the form of literature takes a very different tone than it would on a film. Like film, you have the benefit of the audio being there and the jump scares being there, so you can really ramp up things. In narratively speaking, from a literature perspective, you have to really focus on tone and visualization through somebody's, you know, the charade of the mind, right? So the approach is a lot different, and I think it takes a lot more to really pull it off.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
I'm currently playing Days Gone at the moment. I've played it several times already, but I just fancy jumping straight back into it. And I'm making sure that the sound is up really loud. But if I was to write that, I don't know if you know what it is. It's basically a zombie horror game where you have to basically survive and kill loads of zombies. Sorry, 1 second. When you're sort of racing around, you know, trying to survive and keep yourself alive, you're having to find all the resources that you need to in order to do it. And it's fine because it's a good horror game, but a lot of that is the music. If I played it with no sound on and watched Bugs Bunny on my phone or had Bugs Bunny on in the background, it wouldn't be scary at all. I don't think. Whereas reading something like that in a book, you have to have such good visuals to be able to make that come across.
That tone, that's exactly the right word for it. Yeah.
There's definitely a skill.
What a soundtrack can do to a movie versus what a writer has to do in presenting that same vibe is that's cool. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I think you have that really fine line as well between it being almost a bit too psychedelic, like some of Stephen King's work. Some of it's really good, but some of it, I'm not sure. I think he must have had one of his cocaine benders, but some of it doesn't make much sense because it's a bit like out there. And so you've got this fine line, haven't you, between getting it really right with the tone and having real, like, I don't know how. Do you have it really graphic horror, or is it like quite gruesome, or is it just the tense undertones? Or
are you asking me?
Yeah.
So I tried to tread a very fine line because I knew some of the individuals that were going to read it. So I did tone back. It's not just a gore fest. I had to try and figure out how to prey on more basic fears. I didn't want to. I'm also not a huge fan of just Splatterhouse type stuff anyway. So I prefer tonal disturbances that make people uncomfortable rather than
gore.
Yeah. So there's definitely gore in it, but it's more of a to an effect rather than a response.
Cool. Yep.
Having that undertone sometimes makes it more scary than having all the gore and, you know, making it really graphic, because it ends up, you become not desensitized to it, but like it's there. You don't have to have it in your imagination. You can just see it. I know some people really love that, which there's nothing wrong with that.
I totally was going to say that some people want it and some people write it. That's yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
If you look at Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden series, the first one that he wrote was pretty gore heavy. And then as he moved, and it's a long series, I think he's got 14 or 15 of these books out. But as you move through, it becomes more and more complex in terms of storytelling, more focused on individual conflict as opposed to the gore, and funnier at the same time, while he develops an entire political landscape of people around us that we don't see. So that I suspect, Morgan, as you write more, the more you write, the more you're going to find out that there's a lot of room for variation without losing your genre. A lot of room to play, a lot of room to grow within it without feeling as though you've lost your way because it's no longer exactly what it was when you started.
Yeah, I'm already noticing that with the second half of this. The second book, I've already written 4 times more than I've written for the first book. So it's that I found there's lots of room for nuance.
And the process gets easier and harder at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah, yes, it does.
I think also as well that as you become more confident with your own writing, you become more confident at being able to create new scenes and ideas, and also the way that we understand ourselves and society and how society interacts and how society changes influences how we write too. So we our writing is almost a reflection of what is going on around us at the time. And I think that happens across the board in all genres. So like Martina Cole, she does lots of crime thriller stories. They're all crime thriller kind of based. And I'm not entirely sure of her history. She, I think she spent some time either married to or living with or near to London gangsters. And so a lot of her books center around prostitution, child abuse, domestic violence. And when her books first came out, they were like a big deal because they were really the first of its kind. And she wrote loads and loads and loads of them. But as time's gone on, societies has changed in the way that it really wants to have stories written. And whilst her books are still in print and they're still really good, I think that they are less of an interest now than what they used to be. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think that what you're saying is totally true. That there are contemporary works that fit into a time frame, and once you make them anachronistic and you try and read something from the 80s, if it's not American Psycho and it doesn't really put you into that moment where you're in the 80s, you're going to be pulled out of it and you're going to be trying to find what kind of a phone is this they're talking about? Because we don't have those things anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That I have had to go through, I've been writing screenplays since 1984. And periodically, something that I wrote 20 years ago falls out of option and comes back into my hands having never been made. And then I have to go through it and figure out how this story falls apart if the person has a phone in their pocket.
Yeah.
And I constantly have to go back to everything I've written and make sure that it is in keeping. One of the greatest, I entered the Merlin piece into the Screencraft page to screen competition. It's currently a semifinalist, and I'm waiting to find out if I make the finals. But at the quarterfinals, one of the things that was mentioned is that my handling of masking for COVID was the best the reader had seen.
Wow.
Because I simply deal with it as a fact of life and something that people have to navigate, and I don't make a big deal out of it. And I am aware that, if it takes me 15 years to find the right publisher for this one, then I'll probably have to do a rewrite, to include the oxygen tank that everybody walks around with. But in the meantime, we're constantly writing to the people around us and from the world around us. And as the world changes faster and faster and faster, we're forced to work harder to keep up.
And I think that's the same regardless of the genre. And even fantasy, if you're writing high fantasy, you still need to make it somewhat relevant to something that people can actually relate to. And I think that's probably why Tolkien is held up as such a genius in the way that he writes, because even today you can still find similarities between yourself and the characters within it and the storylines. They are enduring. And I think that's what makes a compelling story, isn't it? That you've got a story that people can relate to, that makes them feel something, whether it's scared or lonely or sad or happy or whatever the emotion. But it's an emotion that they can bond with.
Being able to put the reader into your story rather than having to force the reader to get themselves into your story are two very different things. And I think that's the issue of going back to something from the 80s and being like, this wasn't how the 80s were at all. That's not. I remember living through this. This was not what it was like. Modern take on the 80s stuff. Yep.
Well, this is why my parents hated all the 50s nostalgia when I was a kid. Because, the world is constantly striving to revise its history into something much nicer than it was.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got historical fiction now that does really well. I think Philippa Gregory does some historical fiction. And I think it's her, I might have the name wrong, so I apologize if it's the wrong person. But she writes in Tudor court times, when in medieval England and the Tudor times and relationships, and she writes it from the female point of view and what they had to go through, and they're really interesting. But I do wonder how accurate they are. I mean, obviously she's done research for it, but I don't know how accurate that writing is in terms of what actually happens.
Assume she is aiming for a truth, not for the facts.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
A feeling. And again, to draw the reader in. She wants to take you back to Tudor time while you're reading it. She doesn't need you to be in King Henry VIII's actual court where they were actually eating pheasants. She's going to tell you about it, and you're going to feel like you were in the court eating pheasants with King Henry VIII. That's good writing. Yeah.
You mispronounced peasants.
We do have a humorist. Look at that. My book has got all sorts of cannibalism in it, loaded with cannibalism. Yeah, that's one of the horrors that I deal with.
And did you do research?
Only with Little Long Pig, just a little.
Okay, good.
So you're not a method author then?
Just for the moment, I just had to sample it and move on with my life. Gotta get it and move on.
I just hope they were willing. That's all I say.
I cut off my own foot and served it to myself. That's what.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So that's very meta cannibalism. That's not just I eat my own kind; it's I eat my own self.
Myself, right.
I'm interested. If I could do that, I would never leave my room. Thank you very much. There was a thing that I was thinking about when I found out that we were going to be talking about how one chooses a genre. That I kind of wanted. I stop with the pre-ramble, Dylan. Get to the thought. There was I never have difficulty choosing a genre for a particular piece. I know what the genre is as I start. What I don't always know is what medium I'm writing. And I don't.
Short story versus novella versus novel, maybe?
I mean, short story versus novella versus novel versus play versus screenplay versus television series.
Yeah.
There's always this weird process of discovery for me. The Merlin book that I'm now taking out started as a screenplay 14 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Because I had this bigger idea about Excalibur and what it represents and his desire to destroy it. And I started as a screenplay twice and couldn't get anywhere, and then eventually came to it as a novel. Similarly, my first book, A Tale of a Hero and the Song of Her Sword, Amazon, I believe $7.99, was...
Plug yourself. We'll put the website.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
seriously.
you can.
that's
You
what
can
this
also
is.
put. If you put, sorry to interrupt, if you put your links into the private chat, I will feed them into the main chat so everyone can see it, and I'll see if I can get it up on the screen for you as well.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah. We are into plugging. Yeah, mention your books.
Absolutely.
That first one came from a story that was published in Dragon magazine in 1980. I want to say.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
And then it was about a boy who wants to marry a woman who comes from a family of heroes.
Wow.
And they decide that if he's going to marry her, he has to be a hero. So they set him up with a sword and a baby griffin to kill. And he doesn't want to. So that was the original story. And then I thought, oh, there might be a novel in this. I have this bigger idea. And I started writing it. And I was well, that's a lie. I was a third of the way in. Dealing with this kid who's a poet and he's sensitive and I suddenly realized that if he's a girl, then I don't need to do all this backstory explanation of why he's so different from all the other boys. Oh, it's about a woman who is taking on this male profession. And even then, I didn't know I was writing something about feminism. I thought I was writing something about how we define heroism. So, to my mind, and with the science fiction novel as well, it started as an essay. That's The Warm Hello, also available at Amazon currently. It started as an essay on a particular idea about a psychological phenomenon. And then I thought, what if I could just create creatures that don't have this? And then I had a science fiction story to write, and then it became a novel. So for me, it's never really a process of choosing a genre or choosing a medium. It's a matter of writing until I find out what the hell I'm doing.
That's really interesting.
I actually totally agree with you that the books that I've written, I had no intention of writing horror. I had no intention of writing gruesome, grisly, mature audiences only horror. I did not mean to do that. It just happened. I'd gone from writing erotic, queer celebration books that's a whole celebration of people and character development and story. The story is totally secondary to the world building, to this nightmare thing that's all about a quick destruction of everything. I had no intention of doing that. It's just I jumped from one genre to the other. And just like you, Dylan, I didn't know what genre I was. I didn't know what I was writing. I didn't know if it was going to be a novel or whatever. But I knew exactly what it was when I started. Okay, I want to write a story where, like I said, one group of people is hunting another group of people to eat them, and that's all I'm going to say about that right now. And I was like, how can I do that? And the horror became clear immediately. But then I started writing. I was like, okay, so this is going to be a short novel, maybe a novella. We'll see what it turns into. And then that revealed itself. But yeah, I had no intention of doing this. The story told me what it was going to be. Yeah.
This is exactly the thing I am constantly trying to get the writers in the workshops to do, is to trust the process to inform them. Because our thoughts are too big for us to contain. Young writers show up all the time wanting to tell me everything that happens in their book.
Write it down.
Yep. Start from the beginning, put it in order, figure it out. If you can't do it in order, do it out of order, and then put it in order later. I don't care how you get there. You don't know what you're writing until you write. Yeah. You know why? Because it's magic.
It is. Yep.
You have to go through the process. You have to have the focus to go through the process, to take the steps, to put the words in the right order and to get the inflection right and make the tone correct for the.
That's like what I say about editing, Jules, how it's like a puzzle. That the first draft is a puzzle where all the pieces are there, and editing is the process of putting the puzzle together. That it's
stealing that
fun part of writing. Steal it. Yeah. No, I've been saying that for a long time, that editing is part of the writing process. It's the puzzle assembly. Yeah. It
is only in adulthood that I began to love rewrites. I used to hate them. I used to think my impulse is always better than what I can do later. And now I have learned that rewrites are just more time to spend in the world I've created, playing with it and living with those characters. I got a revise and resubmit from Feminist Publisher on on the Merlin book that I then did that made it a much better book. I'm really pleased with it. And then they gave me another revise and resubmit. And now I'm not sure I want to do it because I don't know if I like their current notes. But I love the idea of being with a feminist micro publisher. I mean, that seems to give me a lot of street cred. But if I don't agree with what they want to do with the book, then it kind of ruins the purpose. But on that rewrite, it was shocking to me when they gave me those first notes. And I went, oh, that's going to be fun. Oh, who is this guy? who is this guy who hears rewrite notes and goes, oh, that'll be fun? Because that's when you find out. That's when you find out what holds up and what doesn't and what needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Morgan, how do you feel about the editing and rewriting process, since we're talking about that right now?
Yeah, I used to be a huge pantser and hate the idea of even looking back at what I written.
Okay.
It wasn't until I failed like probably 12 manuscripts that I realized, I need to actually do this stuff. And then I forced myself into a role where I do like the process now. It's
good. That's amazing. So you have 12 potential books written?
And they're in the drawer. Let me put it that way. Like they're written, but
amazing.
they're gone for the foreseeable future.
Everybody, I'm going to ask everyone to be quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Morgan, listen to the sound of your breath for a moment. You have drafted manuscripts awaiting your attention when they are ready for you and when you are ready for them. This is an accomplishment in itself. Allow yourself to have gone through that process, created those, and on the way learned to do what you are doing now. The willingness of people to disregard or disrespect their own work when it is process work not yet finished, when it is unpublished, when it is good work that needs another rewrite and that you're not ready to do yet. The readiness of people to discount their own accomplishments breaks my heart. You have manuscripts done. You are a fucking prolific writer. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Sorry to have interrupted.
No, he's totally right. You're totally
thank
right.
you.
Yep.
Oh, perfect.
We celebrate it. That's what we're here.
Oh man, good job.
Celebrate writers.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, totally agree with that. Adam and I at the moment are in collaboration writing a novel together, which is out of the genres that we are normally writing in. And, actually what you've just said really resonates, because I feel like I haven't done as much as what Adam has, because it's an interesting piece. It's a psychological thriller.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
And so, it's what you said is really kind of like made me think, actually, no, I have done it, because I've done quite a lot of research. I may not have written as much, but I have done a ton of reading. And
watching and listening and learning about the whole thing, because we're writing a thriller and neither one of us know anything about thrillers, so we're doing our thing in a new way. Yeah, and it's awesome.
I just wrote my very first thriller film, a screenplay thriller, and they're very different from anything I've done before.
And Morgan, let me add to what Dylan said a second ago, that I constantly see people say that they're aspiring authors when they've written stuff, and aspiring means you haven't done anything yet. And that word doesn't apply to us who have written something, whether it's published or not, or self-published or independent or whatever. If you're writing, you're a writer. You're not aspiring. Yeah, you're doing it. So yeah.
Can I also add to that as well? Sorry to jump in. That I do see sometimes published authors really knocking back the hard work that self-published authors put in, and making it seem as if, as a published author, they write more or write better or write more.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And actually, none of that is true. If you have written manuscripts, you are an author.
Yeah.
That's it. And
this belief about self-published, partner-published authors comes from an obsolete notion. Yeah. I grew up in an academic world. My parents were both academics. And in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when the legacy publishing industry held in New York, the only other option was something called vanity publishing, where you paid a company $4,000 and they printed up 200 copies of your book that sat in your garage, and you tried to get other professors to take them.
Yep.
And it was looked down upon. And that has hung on in the psyche, and it's no longer true. Brandon Sanderson, I believe, who is one of my current real heroes in the adventure fantasy and world building world, I believe has shifted away from legacy publishing and is now doing his own publishing after having come up through legacy publishing. So now self-publishing for some people becomes the next step beyond the old model. Mm-hmm. And there are things that you cannot get published. There are ideas that will not be published. I live in Los Angeles, so the example I will give is television, not literature, where it's slightly different. But frankly, the major publishers are all now owned by the same 5 or 6 media companies that own television, so it's probably not that different. In a meeting at Universal Television, I was pitching a show, and we were into the part of the meeting where we were just sort of chatting. And I said, one of the things I've always wanted to do is create a show that's an hour-long crime drama, where every week we can totally see who the rich white guy is that did the crime, while the police pin it on the nearest, easiest black guy. And I thought that would be a wonderful weekly series. And they said, yeah, we can't put that on the air. We're not allowed to do that. The cops have to.
Yeah.
When I made the edits in my Corona Dialogues Lockdown 2020 award-winning feature film, currently screening at the Bright International Film Festival, there's a sequence in it.
Hold on, slow down. Enough with the humility nonsense. Say that with a little pride. Tell us what that was that said. Say that, because we didn't hear that, honey.
Certainly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, darling. It's been so long since a man has called me honey. Oh my God! I feel like I'm in the theater in New York in '92. Oh, that was lovely.
That's my childhood. I was in theater stuff in the '90s.
Oh, I love you so much more now. Corona Dialogues Lockdown 2020, a Dylan Brody project, currently streaming at the Bright International Film Festival. And if you want to see it, you can go to also activevoiceproductions.com/corona-film. I put it up there with no lock on it. There's another place where it's locked, so that people who might want to distribute it think it's exclusive. I want to finish this thought before I get back to what the hell that movie is. There's a sequence in it in which the woman at the center of the film, who is a TV executive, is asked by her brother about a scene in a show she wrote in which a trans kid is raped fights back an attempted rape in a laundromat. And then in a conversation, she mentions someone who comes at her looking rape you in a laundromat angry. And her brother says, what happened in a laundromat? And she says that she was not badass and she did not fight it off. And he says, why didn't you put that in the show? And she says, because you're not allowed to. If I put it in my show, then we'd have to have a whole storyline and they would have to catch the guy and it would have to be a thing, because you can't say on television that sometimes the cops show up, make fun of you for what you're wearing, and creepy laundromat rapists get to go free. And her brother says, I'll bet if you tweeted that, you would catch about 9 of them when they responded, we're not all creepy. And this is like a 6-minute, 4-minute conversation. And I was trying to cut everything I could from this film. And that is a standalone piece of dialogue that was not needed for the storyline. I couldn't bring myself to cut it. Because right now with that project, I'm an independent artist, which means I don't have to abide by the rules set by the power structures that exist. I get to be the outside artist who does say sometimes the creepy laundromat rapist gets away. Whereas if it happens on Law & Order SVU, they have to get him by the end of the hour or he'll be shot on the steps of the courtroom. Yep. Right? We can't acknowledge the truth of this in mainstream writing. And that gives people a lot of freedom who go the independent publishing route. Yep. I don't need to worry. My first TV appearance on Comedy Express in 87 or 88, they cut my piece about the stealth aircraft that had just been announced. And I thought it was political censorship. It turned out it was because Colgate advertised on the show, and they owned the company that was making the surface materials for the aircraft.
Oh my God.
So when you work independently, there's freedom to do stuff from censorship that you have no idea what's causing it.
Yeah. I've got a little story of that as well. That
I love this.
Involves Jules, actually. My novel that she's releasing, I submitted it to Jules and over 100 other agents, publishing companies, whatever, and it was rejected by every single person except Jules. Even after Jules it was like, yes, I want this. Everyone else rejected it because it's got really, really extremely graphic sexual celebration of kinks that are part of the queer community. So no one can ever turn it into a movie. It would have to be a porno, and I'd be okay with that, but that is not going to make any studio any money. So nobody wants my book. Nobody could do anything with it. It deals with really, really heavy sexuality issues and celebrations of things that are celebrated in the queer community, but are, when straight people read it, they're going to freak out a little bit, and that's
dying to know what they are.
Well, and I'm wearing my Alien shirt, by the way, Morgan. I didn't even realize I've got an Alien T-shirt. Sorry,
perfect.
Clicked in my brain, but the novel's 600 pages. It begins with my main character waking up with morning wood, and it just spins off the rails from there.
Weirdly, that's my Indian name.
Wakes with morning wood. There's voyeurism. There's again, because it's a queer norm story, there's celebration of trans and non-binary and all sorts of people types. Nice. And so all the relationships are there. And so I have there's a threesome scene with 2 men and a transgender person. There's a pegging scene with a woman and a sub guy. And I don't know if everybody knows what these terms mean, but they all mean something in the queer community. There's pony play, not involving animals, but involving people. So it just goes.
Okay, so nothing I wasn't aware of before.
Probably not. No, probably not. It's probably all stuff, but you smell everything, you taste everything while you read it. So it's intense from start to finish. All 600 pages, and there is some little adventure fantasy stuff happening, but it's almost all about character development and these queer people that are just growing up not seeing anybody celebrated that I could see myself in. I did that. I put every single person that I ever wanted to see celebrated into this novel, and it's just kooky and crazy, and yeah. So
nice.
Nobody wants it except Jules, and we love Jules for that.
Well, Jules, you and I will need to have an offline conversation about Merlin, perhaps.
Yes, I would be very interested in having a conversation with you about that. Absolutely. Now, one of the reasons why I set up my publishing company is for exactly what we're talking about, because there's so many good independent authors out there who have that freedom to be able to write what they want, but still want to have that published, to have that freedom to write in a way that they want, in a story that they want, with the bits that they want, but also to have the published part attached to it. And I wanted to kind of bridge that gap. So, yeah.
I'll tell you, this actually gets me to go back to the thing that we started on a minute ago. Morgan, feel free to cut me off at any time. Because I talk for a living, and I talk about myself for a living, and I understand that perfect. I can just... Hey, I was talking, pal.
We're very relaxed here. None of us, whilst we're doing this live, and it's obviously on different platforms, yada, 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 we try and make it as relaxed as possible. So honestly, please just jump in. If you have something to say, or if you want to join in and say something specific or interrupt, go for it. Your voice is...
Wave. That's always okay.
When I wrote this, before COVID, this was about to be published. It was going to be my first proper legacy publishing deal. It was with with a small label on a big press, right? And they were going to give me, I think it was $7,500 as an advance. and a book tour. And COVID hit.
Oh no.
And the contract was pulled.
Oh,
Now,
God.
I got the deal. Frankly, I don't think I got the deal entirely based on the quality of the book. I had been opening for David Sedaris, and that gave me a certain amount of literary cred in the humor and short fiction writing world. And I had, some TV spots on my resume. So there was this sense that we could sell books with the book tour. It wasn't, we love this so much, and then it was gone.
Right.
So I shifted to a self-publishing model on this, and then put together what I thought was a short 2-act web play to do with an actress I knew, with 2 of the characters in the book. As these 2 people now in COVID era having to communicate by Zoom. And I thought, I'll figure out how to. After the second one, the actress wrote a 3rd episode.
Oh.
And I realized I had played her brother in the first 2 episodes, figuring the book is mostly about the boy. And I realized that she's a better actor than I am. She's a professional actor, the woman, and as good a writer. And the 3rd episode that she wrote didn't have me in it. So I realized the series is about her. And the series wound up running 32 episodes.
Oh, wow.
You can find that at corona-dialogues.com.
And put all those.
Yeah, I'll put them all in.
Put them in
And
there,
I'll-
and we'll put them across the screen so everybody watching can also see that.
And then Bonnie Hunt came in, and she saw us, what we were doing. She looked at it. I approached her through Twitter. And she came, partnered producer, and played Daniel's agent, Arnie Plesky, the Laughs Never Stop comedy and talent booking agency. And we won a bunch of awards for it. And it was just a few months, it was just before the holidays that I realized I could take several of those episodes and create a single story arc film out of it. So that's what Corona Dialogues, the film, is. And all of this happened as I was writing Merlin's limited series from the book. And it was only last week that I realized that accidentally, with Relatively Painless, Corona Dialogues, and now Lockdown 2020, I had already created a multimedia franchise series.
Wow.
That puts me in position to be taking out Merlin as my second multimedia franchise series accidentally.
Wow. that's so cool.
That's amazing.
See,
Yeah.
With my series, with this one here, mine is centered very much on Ray, who is a 16-year-old girl who grows to become a warrior over the course of multiple books. And I'm very interested in the way people think. Psychology is a big thing that I'm very interested in, and I teach it and studying it as well. And I wanted to embed some of that in the writing. So there's some really dark things. So she gets sexually assaulted when she gets in dungeon. And a lot of it is about her recovery from that and how she manages to deal with it. And so there's monsters that she has to fight in the book. She doesn't necessarily seek them out. They just happen to be in the world. But they're metaphorically representing the issues that she's dealing with, because as the book series develops, they get scarier and more violent and more aggressive and bigger and more scary looking. And it's a metaphor to represent how she's not dealing with the mental trauma that she's been through. And until she gets to the point where she can, her world will continue to spiral and get more and more dangerous as it goes along. And in the process, she's having to save people, and she goes to war and she creates an army, and she's in battle, and she learns she's an amazing archer, not so good with the sword. And there's a mystery she has to uncover, and she gets injured quite a lot as well. So there's lots of things that she has to contend with. But I wanted it to be a book about hope. And that actually, even though you can be on your darkest days, there is a light, no matter how small, somewhere in the distance. And
20,
go on.
20 years from now, Jules, maybe 10 years from now, you are going to be in an interview about your book. You're going to be talking to someone about your book, and you're suddenly going to understand what you needed to know now that you told yourself through the book without knowing it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
That's profound.
The first, no, that's a lie. I'm not going to lie to you. My second screenplay, I wrote after I got to Los Angeles in '86. And I still think it did very well in the Nickel Fellowship competition in '87. It's about a young hero in a mythical land who takes on a royal charter to go on a quest to find a mystical item that's been hidden away in a world that has reasoned away all of its magic, called New York. And this hero gets to New York and finds the gem almost immediately, and then realizes that he doesn't know how to get home because magic doesn't work here.
Oh, wow.
And so he has to spend the book figuring out how to get home and why his father has betrayed him. Now, I did not realize until literally 20 years later that I was writing a screenplay about the fact that I was trained to be an artist in an academic family with these incredibly ridiculous ideals for what art is and how it functions in society, and then moved to Los Angeles, could not go home, and found out that all the tricks I had learned did not work. And it was 20 years later that I was, doing a rewrite because I needed a rewrite for something. And I went, oh my God, I had no idea what I was writing about. But boy, was it what I needed to hear. And you're on top of that. What you are writing is exactly what you need to be fully exploring right now. For me, writing, well, I do both, but writing functions the same way that talk therapy does. Only I don't know that I'm doing it while I'm doing it. I'm rewriting my history. I'm rewriting my understanding of the world. I'm re-exploring and re-examining and codifying the belief systems. Reese? Hi, Reese.
Yeah. Hi, Reese. Would you like to come on to the stream?
Hi, Reese.
Here she comes.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi, Reese. Woo!
Finally made it.
How you doing?
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself, Reese? Tell us a little bit about what you write, your books.
Right, because we're talking about genres today. So hello, everybody. I'm Reese, aka Reese the Storyteller. I am an adult fiction author. I do a little bit of romance, a little bit of erotica. So I kind of play between the two a little bit.
You look very nice today.
Thank you.
Not that you don't look nice any other time, but you do look very nice today.
I have been running around like a crazy person today. Oh my God.
That's the secret. Be a crazy person and you'll be looking all right. Gotcha.
Well, awesome. Should we do some readings?
That would be lovely.
How about we do that?
Yeah, Morgan and Dylan, are you both up for doing a little bit of reading today?
I'm absolutely up for doing reading. I have a question, though. Do you want from this that is currently available, or do you want from Merlin, or do you want the new piece that I'm performing for the first time this Saturday?
We want you to share what you want to share. Seriously.
On this particular software, if I play guitar and speak at the same time, do you hear both, or does it cut out the guitar?
It should play both, I think.
We'll try it when it's my turn. We'll try it, and if it doesn't work, I'll read.
Sure. Yeah, that would be absolutely fine. So, Morgan, are you okay to go first?
Oh yeah, sure.
That was a terrifying.
Yeah, no, you're okay. So quickly before, in that same vein of the topic we were just talking about,
yes,
before I just dive into reading a snippet of it,
Please,
there's two ways you can actually look at this when you read this book. There's the people who can just read it at face value, which is perfectly fine. It's just like your monster horror flick. But in the same vein, it's also a huge story about loneliness and separation issues, and the dangers of really the main character has issues with attachment, where they've had so many issues with abandonment that they're very quick to attach and dangerously attach to people, to the point where they'll misjudge situations in order to be closer to somebody. And so the first book especially is just a very large exploration of that. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like
I love books that have a deeper meaning. I love Rambo for that reason. Rambo on the face of it is just like a killing machine. But read between the lines, and he's a broken man who just wants war to end, and he has to survive, and he's deeply hurt because all of his friends have died and he wasn't there to save them, and all he wants is to be able to live in peace and find peace, but he can't. And so I love that, because I feel like I'm the only one who ever sees that, and I love Rambo because it's just.
I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting that. That was hilarious. That was awesome. That was good.
I was a big Rambo fan.
That's amazing. Okay, so Morgan, have you watched the show before? The way we do it, where all of us will drop off the screen and you can just be on the screen reading, and we'll pop back up as soon as you're done.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay, great.
Wonderful.
I will put on my best narrator voice.
Well, and tell us your name again. Remind us the name of your book, where we can get it, everything, and then dive in.
Yes.
Cool.
So I'll take us all off the screen, and then you'll have the whole screen to yourself. But if at any point you're kind of like struggling, just kind of give us a little bit of a nod or something, and I'll come back on and give you a little bit of support. All right, see you in a sec.
Thanks. So I'm Morgan Miller. I'll be reading a snippet, probably the first part of the first chapter of Carlisle Station. It is available on Amazon or through my website, which is just a link through Amazon. It is a science fiction horror novel. So we'll start with chapter 1. One misstep could spell the end for Sarah Vermillion. Magnetized boots were the only things standing between her and a drawn-out death. Latched to the outside of a space station orbiting an uncolonized planet, she used both a blowtorch and a sledge to break away large chunks of built-up debris. Carlisle Station orbited near the equator of this eyeball planet on a survey mission. Built by the illustrious Kara Corporation to collect data samples for future colonization prospects, the station was placed a few hundred kilometers north of the planet's rings, which consisted of a copious amount of rock and dust. As far as Sarah is concerned, a few hundred kilometers north might as well have been directly in the center of these rings. Enough debris strayed from the rings to collide and build up on the station to give Sarah a lifetime of work. She supposed, however, that was the point. CaroCorp employed one person per station, and these employees weren't really employees at all. They were prisoners. Pulled from incarceration and utilized for cheap labor, members of CaroCorp were both disposable and a cost-effective way of getting things done. For prisoners of the Human Federation of Systems, or HFS, core corporations offered a decent way of shortening one's sentences. Serve on a station or two, and a person could see themselves freed in no time at all. If they survived, that is. Carlisle Station was Sarah's third act of service, and she hoped for it to be her last. Today drove that hope deep as she shattered a clump of dull stone before smashing it with a large sledgehammer. She waved away the debris, and a small drone buzzed close to a vacuum with... She waved away the debris, and a small drone buzzed close to vacuum up the loose material. The station resembled a large floating pyramid encircled by a massive rotating ring, and Sarah worked her way away at a larger spot of the building near one of the points. Despite the lack of gravity, as the station's artificial generators only affected the interior of the station, the sludge Sarah clung onto was unwieldy at best. It was a strange thing. Surrounded by the most advanced technology credits could buy was a woman swinging a wooden stick with a brick of metal pinned to one end. She let go of the blowtorch and watched as the drone drew close and plucked the blowtorch out with a free-floating space with a tiny claw. Doing the same with the sledge, she pulled her arms into a long stretch. Her body ached, and even with the assistance of her motorized suit, the work was grueling. She paused and took in the view. Compared to the other stations she'd work on, Carlisle was offered the best. The planet named Horus 7 sat roughly 160 kilometers away from its parent star, and it was stuck in a tidal-locked orbit. This meant that the planet's rotation, in comparison to its orbit, made for the same side of the planet to always be facing the star. Sarah thought that star looked like a burnt toast. The other side was an ice-filled ocean. There was a small sliver of space between the two, however, that could be considered habitable. Carlisle Station was built to test and sample that consideration. From up here, she could see it all. It was a glowing planet of orange and teal backed by a mural of the cosmos. Cynics considered it to be a black void of nothingness, but Sarah saw it for the truth. Violets and blues stretched out across an endless sea of stars, and each one of those stars offered a chance at limitless possibilities. Though those stars may not know her, they would always be there for her, providing her dreams and escapes that no other living being could understand. And yet here she was, a prisoner of corporate colonization. Taking a break already? A soft voice chirped in her helmet. You've just started. Right, Sarah said, because I haven't been at this for hours. It was my attempt at humor, Gale said. Gale was the station's artificial intelligence, and as far as AIs went, Gale was a bit of an oddity. Sarah had little interaction with the AIs of the previous two stations, and they were coded in a way that made it so. They served only to collect data, and data was their business. Gale, on the other hand, leaped at opportunities to interact with Sarah. It learned things most AI weren't supposed to learn. Its attempt at humor was a small example. I met your humor with sarcasm, Sarah said. You kept on like this, the next person to work on this station is going to be spun in circles by your unexpected wit. I believe you will be the last, Gale said. Speaking of, I have several drones coming back with samples that will need to be offloaded. They'll be docking near the lab momentarily. Right, Sarah said. She grabbed her tools from the hovering drone, hung them from her belt of her suit, and started trudging her way over to the closest airlock. It was a short distance, 100 meters at most, but these boots made the distance to feel tenfold. What makes you think I'll be the last? My contract was only for 6 months. I'm sure with the amount of data that still needs to be collected, the company will send someone else. Sarah reached the hatch and punched her passcode into the access panel. The indicator lit green, the hatch slid open, and turning off the mag boots, she grabbed onto the edge of the opening and let her body start to drift. There's been little interest in the data I've sent, Gale said, and there is no one scheduled in the logs after you. They fear they intend to write the planet off as a loss. Well, if they do, Sarah said. She wanted to enjoy the feeling of weightlessness a bit longer, but there was work that needed to be done. She pulled herself into the airlock and braced for the onset of gravity. Why does it matter? The station will be decommissioned, Gale said. The airlock closed and the chamber pressurized. The structure will be taken apart for repurposing and all the data will be archived until further notice. As will you, Sarah said. The realization hit her at the same time as the floor, gravity returning. You feel afraid of what will happen to you. I do not feel, Gale said, but Sarah could have sworn she heard a sharpness to its tone. I know the data is better utilized elsewhere. Archiving it would be wasteful. Right, Sarah said. She didn't feel like pressing the AI any further on the subject. Instead, she cracked the seal around the neck of her suit and pulled off her helmet. Pulling her glove free, she pressed her bare hand onto the next access panel, which opened the next door. And Sarah hauled herself into the station proper. Setting the helmet to one side, she began unlatching and unwrapping the suit from her body. The suits on Caracorp stations were absolute worst. Thick, heavy, and the process for getting into and out of them was a nightmare. It was yet another cheap escape the company used to punish its prisoners. The galaxy had fabric-thin and virus suits readily available, and yet Sarah was stuck with this. At last, she stepped out of the final bit of the suit and pulled on her blue Caracorp branding coveralls. You aren't going to leave that there, are you? Gale asked. I am, Sarah said. I'll worry about it later. For now, the lab samples are calling. Like the drone you have yet to repair in engineering, Gale asked. Yes, Sarah said. Like the drone I have yet to repair in engineering. The next time you ask me about that, I'm going to unplug something that's important. That would be unwise, Gale said. Exactly. Sarah stretched and let out a jaw-cracking yawn. It helped with her ears as they always popped with the changing of pressure after coming in from the spacewalk. Cutting through hydroponics, its rows upon rows of greenery were getting their daily misting as she waltzed through. Sarah made her way over to the labs. Large swaths of this area were barred behind thick panels of ballistic glass. Caracorp was meticulous in making this area prisoner-proof, and Sarah found that sight rather amusing. In most circumstances, this entire section would be locked and secured, and the drones would be tasked with all the sorting and offloading of samples. At Carlisle Station, however, Gale was in charge. Whether Gale would admit to have feelings or not, Gale liked Sarah and she knew it. The AI opened up the labs to her and used the now free drones to gather even more samples. These samples got sorted and placed into different testing areas behind the panels of glass where long robotic arms would do the work usually reserved for scientists. A faint hiss sounded at the back of the lab, indicating the transport tubes were at the end of their docking sequence, and Sarah getting ready to open. Sarah made her way to the back, where the series of circular hatches were lined up on the far wall. They twisted and spun in sequence, sheets splitting open for a long rack of clear containers to eject and hang suspended in the lab, waiting to be offloaded. One by one, Sarah set to work taking each of these containers from a rack, which were mostly filled with samples of either dirt, fauna, or various liquids, and placed them into collection areas where the robotic arms would pull them through and sort them. She went on like this for quite some time, finishing one rack, then moving on to start another. It put her in a sort of trance where she could exist thought-free and just move and sort. It's part of the reason she enjoyed doing it. Her lonely mind had a taste of creating thoughts to poison to the soul. Those thoughts would leave an acidic and unpalatable aftertaste that could linger in the forefront of her mind for weeks. She hummed while she sorted and almost missed Gail trying to speak to her. I'm sorry, Gail, she said. What are we saying? My records indicate you've only got a few weeks left, Gail said. What do you plan to do with your new freedom? I haven't decided yet, Sarah said. It's been so long, I'm not sure I know what to do with myself. From what I understand, Gail said, most who have been isolated as long as you will often seek companionship at the first opportunity. Sarah snorted a laugh and waved a hand as if the AI were a person standing next to her. No thanks, she said. People aren't my thing. It's part of the reason why I've even signed up for these missions. No awkwardness, no one to stab you in the back. One thing, now that you've got me thinking about it, is I've been contemplating a bit of sightseeing. I want to explore the stars and write about what I see. I thought, with over 1 trillion people floating around in this galaxy, at least one would be interested in something I have to say. Maybe I could just make somebody feel something or inspire somebody to do the same. You want to matter, Gail said. It was unexpected pungency from the AI that Sarah wasn't quite sure how to process. Did Gail understand the feeling, or was it making a logical connection based on data? She almost wished she could take Gail with her when she left and learn more about it. Sarah nodded, but left any response she might have had unspoken. She started back to work on the racks, but froze. Her hand paused over one of the clear containers, her brain trying to work out what was inside. Then she recoiled. A dark shape uncurled itself in reaction to her motion. A long chitinous body, the light caught the light as it moved, and it reflected shades of red as its countless legs began to skitter across the glass. A deep fear awoke in Sarah that she had not known existed before. The centipede-like creature, with its aberrant head filled with a multitude of fangs, made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. Her heart thudded in her chest like a drum that's lost its rhythm. Gail, Sarah asked, are you sure it's a good idea to start bringing aboard these kinds of living samples? Of course, Gail said. There's minimal risk to the station. If you do not wish to move the sample, you may wait for the drone to return and finish the work. No, Sarah said. I can do it. If anything bad happens, let it go on company records that I thought this was a bad idea. Noted, Gail said. Taking a deep breath, Sarah wrapped her hand around the container and removed it from the rack. She hurried it over to one of the collection areas, but she could feel the thing moving and shaking with the container. It looked venomous, but Sarah did her best not to think about that. What if it was the type of venom that induced necrosis? Again, bringing this thing aboard seemed like a terrible idea. She all but threw the container at the collection point and took a quick step back as the robotic arm snagged it. If it escaped and managed to find its way into her living quarters, Sarah would march down to Gail's central node and unplug every cord that allowed the AI to function. She took a deep breath and collected herself. There were several more racks left to take care of, so Sarah focused her attention on those. From what she could tell, there did not seem to be any more insects contained within the jars, only plants and samples of dirt. Sarah, Gail said. I'm fine, she said. They better have only been the only one. No, Sarah, Gail said. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Sarah asked. I'm going to need you up on the communications deck, Gail said. We're being hailed by a ship. And that's the first chapter.
Sorry, I pressed the button and nothing happened. I'll do the old school way.
That's how you end a chapter, baby.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're here. We were listening. Yay.
That was really good. That was really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
I love the centipede. Like, I don't have arachnophobia, but I can imagine if you see something like that for the first time, that would instill.
Yeah.
Well, and I totally felt that alien vibe of like the sort of the way that when they present the intro of that movie, it's like space has become mundane to them. Oh, I'm back at this slugging away at this job, and that was awesome. I gotta get back out there. These boots are heavy, even though I've got this suit that assists my muscles and bones and my own body. It still sucks. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That was great.
Thank you.
I totally felt alien in there.
I think I was in my teens when Alien, the first movie, came out, and my dad took me to see it. And it starts with that long pan through the ship that winds up on the bird drinking water. And my father leaned over to me and said, "In the future, that's how they power the ships."
Nice.
That's a dad joke for the ages.
I really like the way that you described Spaceball. So it's something that is really difficult to describe, I think, if you've never experienced one. And I kind of really felt like I was with them. And even the fact that they just kind of came back to the ship as if it was just, like Adam just said, like a mundane thing that they just had to do. But yeah, for me, what got me was the centipede. I was just like, "Oh, that is creepy." And then the venom as well. I was just like, a venomous centipede that might eat you. Yeah, definitely horror vibes. Very good. Really, really good.
Thank you.
Can you just remind everyone the name of your book and where they can get it from?
Yeah, it's Carlisle Station, and it's available on Amazon in hardback, paperback, and also on digital copies.
Wonderful. And I've got your website as well that's scrolling along the bottom of the screen. So
Awesome.
Can you get it from there, or is that website just for you to
Yeah, the link is also there. Yeah.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Good,
Wonderful. All right. Dylan, are you ready to read some of yours?
Uh-oh, Dylan, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I blame myself. Are we okay now?
There we go.
First of all, do you hear both guitar and speech at the same time?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay. I have made some decisions. I'll be doing a very short piece that I'll be opening a set with this Friday, and then I will read from my book a story that I cut a segment from. I realized I should read that one because I cut a segment from it when it was going to be a legacy publishing deal because they made me, and then I put it back in when I got to self-publish. But first, this.
Excellent.
Anyone who is familiar with my work, and really who isn't, will know that many of my stories can be long and heavy in multi-textured shades of gray like the prominent proboscis of the ponderous pachyderm. This piece, to maintain that mammalian metaphor, is little more than a bit or two of gerbil fuzz, a beat or two of gerbil fuzz, a bit of gerbil fuzz and verbal jazz, a twist of the wit, a trick of the tongue, a tantalizing taste of linguistic terpsichore. Call it a pithy parcel of prosodic prestidigitation, if you will, and if you won't, you're a bunch of anti-semantic bastards. It's called I Like to Support the Arts. On my way home from a gig, I stopped at a convenience store to buy milk for my morning coffee, ice cream for my wife. As I crossed from the car to the store, I was approached by an unemployed magician. He had the hungry eyes of a hunting hound. He said, "I got a quarter in my pocket, I can make it disappear. Got a quarter in my pocket, I can make it disappear." I said, "Show me." I swear to you, ladies and gentlemen, all he did was snap his fingers. He said, "It's gone." I said, "Where did it go?" He said, "Check your pocket." I checked my pocket, and sure enough, there, among all my other loose change, a bright, shiny quarter. I said, "Hang on, how do I know this is yours?" He said, "Check the date." I checked the date. I said, "It's from 1994. He said, "That is mine." I returned it to him. I said, "That's amazing, change it back." He said, "I never repeat myself. I never repeat myself." I said, "Show me another." He said, "I will need a $10 bill." I said, "All I have is a 20. He said, "That will do." I handed him a $20 bill. He folded it up right in front of me. No alakadabra, no abracazam. When he unfolded it, it was a 5. He handed it back to me. I said, "That's amazing. Change it back." He said if I could change 5s into 20s, I wouldn't be out here working for tips. I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was supposed to tip you." I gave him the 5. I like to support the arts. As I crossed back from the convenience store, holding on to milk for my morning coffee, carrying ice cream for my wife, the unemployed magician approached another man in the parking lot. He said, "I got a quarter in my pocket. I can make it disappear." Got a quarter in my pocket. I can make it disappear. I watched him with the hungry eyes of a hunting hawk, ladies and gentlemen. And I swear to you, all he did was snap his fingers. That piece is I Like to Support the Arts. It is newly reworked with music added. Originally, it was simply a spoken word piece, a storytelling endeavor, and can be found on my 3rd album with Stand Up Records, I believe, called A Twist of the Wit. Now, from my book, Relatively Painless, right there, available at Amazon, available at dylanbrody.com and dylanbrody.com/emporium. This story is called Memory's a Funny Thing, and when it was under a legacy contract, it needed to be drastically rewritten. And then when I published it myself, I got to put everything back in that I wanted. Daniel was not certain that his father had remembered it all. Perhaps he had gotten the date wrong or written down the name of the club incorrectly. He had peered out discreetly into the crowd during the laughs and the applause breaks, but the stage lights made individuals indistinguishable. It would be typical of his father to make a big deal out of emailing for the information and then find a way to miss the show. As he came off the stage, he met some strangers who had enjoyed his performance. Then he saw Paul awaiting his attention, small and frail in his overcoat, as though the weight of the wool itself might buckle the man's aging legs. Daniel disengaged from a knot of admirers, went to his father for a hug, a moment of genuine human connection, before the familial guards came up, the tensions, the mannerisms. They stood awkwardly for a moment, assessing one another, shuffling. I need a cigarette. Can we? Paul trailed off with a gesture toward the door, and together they stepped out of the warmth. "You're funny." "Thanks. I'm glad you could make it. You're much smarter than most of the guys who went on the stage tonight." Daniel shrugged. He shifted his feet. He agreed, but it wasn't a thing he liked to say aloud. He preferred to mask his arrogance. Paul sighed smoke. He blinked in a way that was almost a wince, almost a flinch. It told Daniel that he was trying not to say something, or more accurately, hoping to be coaxed. Daniel did not know how not to oblige. "What?" Paul feigned confusion. "What?" "Don't do the Meisner thing with me. There was something you wanted to say." Paul nodded. He sighed again, shifted his head from side to side for a moment as though he was weighing options. "I think you know." Daniel thought he knew too, but he'd been wrong before. He winced. He waited. "There's a bit in there that you really have to stop doing." Daniel had correctly surmised his father's thought. He knew which bit Paul was talking about. It was this. "The last time I visited my grandmother, Alzheimer's was just setting in. Every time she saw me, she thought it was my birthday and gave me $5. It was exhausting to deal with. I had to keep walking in and out of that room." For the record, that is not a self-loathing anti-Semitic joke about a cultural relationship with money that values it above human decency. It's a self-loathing anti-capitalist joke about a societal relationship with money that values it above human decency. She had just reached that point in the progression of the disease at which every conversation turns into a surreal 1970s television game show. She'd say, "I went to that place with the buildings and the smell," and we'd all shout, "Manhattan?" "Yes! I was with that know-it-all lady with the flowered dress and the long, boring stories." Your best friend Katie?" Yes! We saw that horrible man. We need more clues. He used to be horrible all in New York City, and then he was horrible all over the country, and now he's horrible from space. Howard Stern? Yes! Congratulations, Grandma. You're going on to the Dementia Pyramid. Who are you people? Things you yell at the dinner table. Where am I? Things you shout from the bathroom. Ed Asner, Benjamin Netanyahu. People you mistake for your dead husband? Ding, 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 ding. Hey, Grandma, great clues. Big winner. I remember my mother was all freaked out, realizing that she was facing a genetic crapshoot. She said, Daniel, you have to tell me if I start showing symptoms so I'll know when it's time to take my own life. I said, Mom, we just had this conversation 20 minutes ago. Hands in his pockets, shoulders up against the cold, Daniel risked the guess. The Alzheimer's run? Yeah, it's not funny. Gets a lot of laughs and a huge applause break. That doesn't mean it's funny. Then it would destroy your mother if she saw it. She can handle more than you think. It's about her mother. Yes. Paul pulled smoke. He pressed his lips together. It's really offensive. Different people are offended by different things, Dad. I think you've forgotten how awful it was. Daniel said, no. It wasn't cute, Danny. It wasn't funny. It was tragic. That was when, with absolute certainty, Daniel knew that he was right and his father was wrong. In 1974, Daniel was 10 years old. He went with his parents and his sister to visit Grandma and Grandpa at their home in New Jersey for a big, tense Thanksgiving dinner, long before his grandmother's mind began to slip. During one of the difficult pauses while his mother bathed in a lifetime of familial subtext, and his father tried to imagine how he was being judged by his in-laws, to avoid putting another inedible bite of turkey-flavored particle board into his mouth, Daniel said, this summer I'm going to camp. I'm going to ride horses and play guitar. His grandmother, still healthy in her late 60s, said, I went to a camp once. Grandpa laughed sharply. Daniel's parents, Paul and Ellen, gasped. His sister, Lindsay, stared at her food. When things made people laugh, she went quiet, as though she had to analyze every word in careful silence. Grandma went on with barely a pause. Spent 9 months of my life in a yard full of gypsies and queers playing liar's poker. With a deliberate gesture, she rolled up a sleeve to look at the numbers tattooed on her forearm. Pair of threes. She paused, looking at an imagined opponent. 3 5s. Grandpa laughed now in a way that was joyous and actively supportive as he saw the discomfort on the faces of Daniel's parents. Paul said, stop it, Sally, that's terrible. Ellen sighed. Paul's jaw tensed, compressing rage between his teeth. Daniel watched it all, sorting out as best he could the source of his parents' discomfort, trying to reverse engineer the backstory that made his grandmother's joke so potent. Grandpa, always ready to put horror under laughing glass, grinned at his wife. He said to Daniel's parents, or perhaps to Daniel himself, you know, that's when I fell in love with her. You know how sharp you have to be to win with the same numbers every day? Besides, I always liked skinny girls. Come on, man! And it sounded like some sort of a warning. Paul glanced toward Daniel and Lindsay, clearly hoping his father-in-law would follow his gaze, would censor his wit for the benefit of the kids. Grandpa would not be silenced through intimidation or outrage, though. He would not be quieted by the squeamish manners of the man who had married his daughter. I saw her across the yard and I thought, my God, her tights are loose. He took a beat to let the shock register on the faces of Paul and Ellen before he tagged it with, then I realized she wasn't wearing tights. This image made Daniel laugh a little, and Grandma fell apart with giggles. Ellen said, really, guys, this is wrong. Set an example. You don't make jokes about tragedy. Grandma feigned anger, but Daniel could see that she truly reveled in the moment. She smelled their offense like blood in the comedic waters and could not help herself. Oh, Ellen, no! We're Jews. We don't believe in tragedy. We believe in horror, atrocity, and injustice. We recognize them all as inherently hilarious. At that, Grandpa and Paul both laughed, and Ellen raised her hands in surrender. If it was a battle of wit, a battle of jokes, she could not compete. To emphasize the urgency of her statement, Grandma leaned across the table directly toward Daniel and poked at the side of his head with a stiff finger. "Never forget." Daniel hadn't. He had remembered every moment of the conversation, and over the years, he had understood with increasing wonder just what his grandparents were so funny about. As he learned their history and the larger history of which they had been a part, the series of jokes came into focus one at a time until he realized that the miracle of his grandparents was not their mere survival, it was their ability to remember and still feel joy. The miracle was that their that their laughter was genuine and warm, not manic. On the sidewalk outside the club, he recounted the important information to his father. Grandma said, "We're Jews. We don't believe in tragedy." Paul snorted and smoke came with it. "She also said, never forget. Look where that got her." Daniel chuckled. "That's funny. Don't use it." "Only if you promise you will." "What, you mean in conversations?" "Maybe you can sneak it into an academic treatise on the danger of cliché. Or when you're talking to your therapist about how insensitive and inappropriate your son is." Paul shook his head. He stamped his feet in the cold as though it could warm him up. He pulled on the cigarette as though that could warm him up. "Do you remember that night that she said that to me? Thanksgiving, 74? Said what to you? That we don't believe in tragedy. She and Grandpa were doing shtick together. You and Mom were very upset." I think I blocked most of those Thanksgivings out. They were difficult for me. That's why I have to wrap it all in jokes, Dad. All the horror, all the loss, all the injustice. It's the only way to preserve it. Without the lens, it hurts too much. It gets blocked. That's what they were telling me. That's why they were so funny together. You don't remember the conversation? Paul shook his head. He shrugged. Those holidays had been problematic, tension beforehand, raising dread. Ellen's parents judging him for his lack of financial savvy, poking at him for the years he had spent barely supporting her and the kids before he got his footing. The overcooked, overly ostentatious meals that served as a passive-aggressive demonstration of decadent opulence. The dirty jokes that were supposed to seem risque and naughty rather than vulgar, just because they came from people with gray hair, not from construction workers. You muttered and cursed about how inappropriate they were all the way home in the station wagon, Daniel chuckled. It was pretty hilarious. Paul shrugged, unable to find the humor. I don't remember. That is Memory's a Funny Thing from Relatively Painless, available at dylanbrody.com. That story was also published in American Bystander, though I don't know offhand what issue it came out in. Thank you for all these lovely notes you've been sending me in the chat window. I am so programmed to look for the laughs and to respond to audience that I had to correct my readings twice because I was reading how much you were enjoying me in the chat window instead of the page.
It's quite difficult when you're reading particular stuff on here and like you're expecting to have a response from an audience and there's silence.
Well, I've gotten used to that. I made a shift from stand-up comedy to storytelling that started on the radio. So I got used to talking out into the void, right? And just constantly soothing myself that people are hearing and enjoying it. And seeing these in the chat window coming up just made me so happy that I wanted to just stop reading and just read the comments because it was like having an audience again.
But should we share some of those comments? Because they're actually in the private chat amongst us, and obviously they weren't out in the public. So
people can tag or post on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and there's a private chat here that they can't see. So I guess it's over that way. But I think we can put those straight into the chat also, so they can see our private chats as well.
Let me just say the people who are here with me via the this isn't a Zoom, but via the interwebs, have been typing into the thing when they laughed and how many times they've snorted, and it's so much better for me than actually hearing the laughter. It gives me a little bit of distance, and it doesn't feed my ego in quite the same way. It just assures me that I'm still doing it right. So I appreciate it.
Oh, that's awesome. There were several laugh out loud moments. Yeah, that was awesome. Yep. And I
thank you.
Why the one person was offended, the dad or whoever that like the
Yeah.
in between generation, doesn't get it. I totally understand that. That is so believable and realistic. Yeah.
Nice.
There was this is completely separate from you, but it's very relevant. There was someone had posted onto a social media site an image of soldiers who had big grins on their faces. They were obviously messing around. And most of the comments were like, oh, ha, ha, soldiers being silly or whatever. And soldiers are ridiculously stupid. Not because they're like stupid up here, but they just mess around a lot. And they use humor a lot to be able to deal with the trauma that they are experiencing on the front. And someone got very upset about the fact that there was a photograph of soldiers smiling and couldn't understand why they were laughing when they were supposed to be doing a very serious job. And it was really difficult to try and explain to someone that actually laughing is the only way they can cope. Mm-hmm. They don't talk about it. They don't see counselors. They don't see psychotherapists. They don't register mental health problems because it means that they can't have a job anymore. And so humor is a really good way for them to be able to get out, as well as getting drunk. But it kind of links really nicely with what you're
the way that just eased on in there. That's what I was getting drunk.
One of the things that I realized as a comic, as a humorist, as someone who works with laughter, is that ultimately stand-up comedy, post-vaudeville stand-up comedy, is the canary in the coal mine for all social issues. 25 years before the public acknowledged and any repercussion occurred over Catholic abuses of children, comics were doing jokes about getting diddled in the pews.
Yep.
20 years, well, not 20, but I guess 10 years, 8 years before the big riots in LA because a black man was beaten near to death by police on video for the first time. Black comics were in clubs talking about, sure, on your side of town, it's stop police. On my side of the town, it's freeze. Yeah. And people laughed in recognition of all these things. Yeah. So society is able to hold on to these cognitive dissonances where we know we're performing horrible acts of injustice and tragedy and pretend we don't, and then secretly acknowledge it when it can be funny.
Yeah.
Long before it can come out as a real issue.
You're absolutely right about that. I grew up with Eddie Izzard. As far as comics go, he presented someone in a queer lifestyle that was at least unique, and no one talked about any of the issues he brought up for 20 years, like you're saying. Yeah.
And non-threatening.
Yeah.
Yes. He was not utterly non-threatening.
Yep.
I'm just a bloke in a dress. I like girls. I like birds. Don't worry. This is just how I dress. Like there's all this backing away from it. I used to, in the 80s and 90s, I was doing a lot of anti-homophobia material at a time when there was a lot of homophobic material around me. So if I was the feature act, there were headliners who, if they didn't watch me, couldn't figure out why all their fag jokes weren't getting laughs tonight. Mm-hmm. And if I was headlining and the feature act was horrible, then I would reference them. So-and-so was just saying a minute ago, but I think, so that I could build out my idea as counterpoint. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there was a segment I had to do at the beginning that in which I would say, I don't understand homophobia. I don't know what there is to be afraid of. It's not as though there are packs of gay men roaming the countryside, forcing straight men to have blowjobs against their will. We know that because no man has ever had a blowjob against his will. I'm a constantly dating, sexually active, white, straight male. But if someone makes an offer and they got a pretty close shave, I got to think about it before I give a straight up or down answer. And by cracking it open first by saying I'm heterosexual and now we're going to be touching this stuff from this perspective, I could get them there with me. But I had to do a lot of groundwork to start to break what were then the societal rules about what you're allowed to think. Right. one of my first TV appearances, there was a 20-minute conversation about whether or not I could say that I didn't understand why people were opposed to gays in the military. Because, look, you're trapped in a foxhole in Afghanistan. Don't you think the guy next to you is more likely to save your life if he's in love with you? See, I don't care what he's saving my ass for as long as it's getting saved. That's my. I want to be the most popular guy in the barracks if my life is on the line. You know, candies and flowers for everyone. And these ideas were still taboo. Mm-hmm. That I could have empathy, right? The idea that I could be open to this, as opposed to taking the stance that gay guys with machine guns is scary. The story I read a minute ago, there was a very toned down version of it when it had the Legacy Publishing deal. They didn't want the Holocaust jokes.
Interesting.
And I argued with them.
Too soon.
Yeah, exactly. What are we?
Right.
But at that time, Trump was in office, and corporations were afraid of offending Nazis.
Yeah.
Let me repeat that.
Yeah.
Corporations were afraid of offending Nazis.
Yeah. And I think they still are to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Politicians certainly are.
We're quite lucky over here because we have
your accent, because you have your accent. That's why you're lucky over there.
We have pantomime, which runs from like November through to January. And we have it every year, and it's in every theatre across the whole of the UK. And we normally have some big TV stars that playing major roles in it. And the most prolific, important, regular role that happens, that has to be in every single pantomime, is Widow Twankey, or whatever their name happens to be in the play, regardless, you know, whether it's Peter Pan or Robin Hood or whatever. And it's always a female who plays like the Robin Hood or Peter Pan or Cinderella or whatever. But Widow Twankey is always played by a man. Always. And the pantomime, they are the central core character in the pantomime. And so partway through the pantomime, you will normally have like a break, not a break as in like, you obviously have like an interval where the audience goes and has a break, but there's a break where Widow Twankey does their own bit, and they come on stage and they normally get the audience to sing a song, or they get children to come up on stage and like get sweets or whatever. And they are dressed up to the nines with full-on stage makeup, with a big dress, big boobs and everything. And it's just so normalized in our culture that when we see someone on TV dressed as a man dressed as a woman, for example, most people in the UK are just like, meh.
Well, interesting.
The comparison is you had in Britain, you had that normalizing things for decades.
Yeah.
When we go back and watch movies from the 80s and 90s, everyone is calling everybody else fag constantly. I can't go back and watch any movie from my childhood without getting offended, because that was a normal thing when they were just the what's that fucking like high school 70s movie, Dazed and Confused. I went back, I was like, watch Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
I was ready to burn that shit to the ground halfway through. I was so offended at shit. What gets so normal back at that time? Oh.
My understanding of the English drag, though, is that it is always asexual.
Yeah, there's no sexual connotation. I mean, obviously there are probably shows and groups and, you know, clubs and stuff that do have that sexualized part of it, but the overt drag stuff that happens is completely non-sexual related. It's literally just a man dressed up as a woman, but like accentuated features.
The history
a lot.
of drag in America has always had an element of offending people, except recently.
Yeah.
That's gone away recently, but drag has always had a point of offending people. I'm a man in a dress, and I'm going to make you upset. Different from transsexual or transgender or any of the trans world. That's different from drag queens who were men living as men who wanted to be seen as women for part of their life to offend in a small way somebody.
And at the same time, we have the homophobia baked into it, going all the way back to Some Like It Hot, with where Jack Lemmon and is it Walter Matthau in that film? Is it? I don't think it is. Whoever it is, where you've got the one character who's into the role, and the other, and that's all the comedy, right? That's funny. He's starting to do all the women stuff, and the other one who's just awkward in the clothes. So the joke is always on whoever engages and really imagines. They're never allowed to be the hero.
One of the reasons why it works better in Britain is because one of the things that we tend to do is we actually just insult each other a lot. And normally the closer we are to someone, the more insults they tend to get. And so like the term fag, if someone smokes, they're smoking a fag.
Right. No. I understand the
whole different meaning of the word.
Yeah, different meaning of
the word. There's also a dish called faggot, which is, I mean, I've never eaten it, but it's a delicacy somewhere in our country.
Adam, have you ever eaten it?
And so, so again, language plays a massive role in that, doesn't it? Because the language that we have for things, and there are some people who are trying to ban a Christmas song that has the phrase "cheap, lousy faggots," and it's one of our most famous, like, best Christmas songs ever. I'll see if I can find you the video of it. It's awesome, but it's. Some people are like, "Oh, don't like it because it's got that word in it," but it's got a different meaning, even though I don't know.
Right. Well, every time they say it in any of those movies I mentioned from that era, they're not talking about cigarettes or food. Never.
No, I know.
Never. That's not what they're saying at all. So I get it that the language is so different that this word doesn't mean what it means in your country, and so here we talk about it as cigarettes. We use it regularly. Totally. I totally acknowledge that and get that.
We use it as an insult as well. So and that's where it becomes really difficult, like the word bitch. It's an actual word that we use to describe an animal, and now it's become a swear word. So it's like whenever I have a bitch, I literally have a bitch. She's downstairs, probably curled up on the sofa.
And I only use that word if I'm talking to other guys. I don't say that to women. That I'm with you on that. Yeah, because it's offensive that way, but to men it's
really
complimentary.
It's troubling then, Adam. Here's what I'm going to suggest. I find if I have language that I can only use in certain circumstances, I expunge it. I don't feel the need to hang on to phrases that were acceptable when I was younger, just because I'm used to using them in some circumstances.
To me, this goes back to the drag queen thing. The element of offense is intentional. It's supposed to make people feel uncomfortable to have a bunch of men calling each other bitches and
I'm not interested. I'm not interested in making people uncomfortable.
No, and I get it.
I want to change things.
Well,
I very much want to change things, but I think I don't think we get there.
Well,
by making the people we disagree with more uncomfortable with.
That's what I mentioned at the beginning of this little tiny segment right here, is that drag has evolved. It's not made to make people offended anymore. That's part of the history. That is a major part of what drag was. And now it's a performance art that can be done by anybody that is celebrated in the queer community primarily, but because it's now going out and being welcomed to all types of people, everybody is doing drag, and they're calling it drag, but they just mean performance art. And I love that.
Oh, this is an essay you should write. Write this.
That would be a really good piece, seriously.
I've got a drag queen in my book who talks all about this stuff.
Yep. Nice. Well done. That doesn't mean you can't repurpose it as an essay.
Right. No, totally. Nonfiction. Yep.
Well,
it's a really interesting thing.
The history of clothes, I mean, again, I'm not an expert on this, but the history of clothing has evolved through time, and men used to wear skirts effectively. I know they weren't called skirts, but in terms of just visualization of what they looked like, they wore things that would mean it was easy for them to go to the toilet, to walk around, to stay cool when it was hot. And if you look at the Scottish Army uniform, they wear tartan clothing, which and so
Excellent camouflage if you are doing battle in a Scotch tape store.
Or shortbread.
I couldn't remember the word cellophane, which is what British use and would have allowed me not to have Scotch in the punchline. God, I'll hate myself over that for the rest of the day.
Well, it's all right. I think our understanding of outfits and clothing, yes, clothing does define us, but I think by putting us in boxes as to men should wear this and women should wear that, it kind of comes away from actually self-expression, doesn't it? It's just clothes. How does someone wearing something specific offend someone else?
If it's tartan, it's literally putting people in boxes.
Well, that's true.
Morgan, I want to say I saw your little friend come in and give you some love. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful dog. I had to kick mine out of the office.
Mine's asleep on the couch over there, yeah. This has been a great discussion today. My goodness.
You guys are fun. Thank you for letting me play. I hope I haven't over-dominated.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're so welcome. And I really, really, really hope that you both come back and visit us again. Because
anytime you'll have me.
Absolute blast having you both as guests.
Yeah, and we've had people on multiple times before. That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're interested in joining us on Discord, Adam sent you the link and so is Reese. I've also put my email in our chat as well. So if you wanted to get in touch after the show, then by all means check out my email in the private chat. And I'm going to say a massive thank you to you all for coming, and thank you so much for last week and your support and kindness that you showed me. And I'm just going to say what a wonderful day it was to see you all, and I really hope to see you all very soon. Bye.
Cool. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Love you.